we're on the hour, so I will kick things off, and I assume people will, some of the stragglers will gradually make their way in. So let me just turn on my screen sharing here, and we'll bring up the page that we will be using today. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another solely Fireside educational series. Today we'll go through our educational run through, and then we'll take some Q&A from the community afterwards, either relating to the presentation, the market in general, or anything in regards to SpiritSwap that the community want to communicate about. But yeah, look, picking up from last week's educational series where we did a deep dive into interacting with the router contract directly to make and break LPs. This week we'll be looking at how to deposit these newly minted LPs into the Gauge contract and thus putting these assets to work. So just to add some context here for our newcomers out there, SpiritSwap has a bit of a different farming system to the standard DEX protocol, whereby we operate a full on-chain governance gauge model. Think of gauges as like a standard DeFi farm, but with one key difference. Governance holders, in this case in-spirit holders, can determine where emissions for these farms go each week. This adds an element of decentralization to our ecosystem, whereby a centralized team can't control emission flow to limit conflict of interest. So rather, we let our community or in-spirit holders determine where emissions flow each week via a weekly epoch reset, which happens at 5 p.m. PST every Wednesday. So this happened yesterday. So when you guys cast your votes on the various gauges, depending on how many votes each gauge receives will ultimately determine how many emissions, how much incentives that gauge receives for the following week. So when we're referring to the gauge contract here, we're simply referring to the contract that operates the gauge or farm, as a lot of you will commonly refer to it as, for the specific liquidity pool that it supports. So in today's example, and continuing with the theme from previous weeks, we'll be working with the Spirit Phantom LP directly. However, the same methodology can be applied to any liquidity pool contract that has a gauge contract assigned to it to incentivize and support that liquidity. So without any further ado, let's crack on and hope for no further awkward silences like last week. He chuckles nervously. I'll make this an interactive session again today. So I'm just going to copy paste a few things here into the Fireside Chat. And as per our common theme, there are some prerequisites, some things that we have to sort of organize beforehand whenever interacting with a contract. Today, the prerequisites will be the LP contract. So we'll need the LP contract for querying the value of the liquidity pool. We'll need the gauge contract for the Spirit Phantom liquidity pool, obviously, because this is the main contract that we're going to be interacting with today. And then we also need the gauge proxy contract for locating the specific gauge contract that you want to interact with. Nice and simple. In this example, we don't require any of the tooling parameters from last week, as there are no time epochs required. There's no need to convert numbers for these specific functions. So we're only working with 3 basic contracts this week. So first off, we need to find the gauge contract. And this can be troublesome for you if you haven't interacted with it in the past. Usually, if you wanted to identify a specific gauge contract that you deployed your LP tokens into, you could just go into your history within Phantom Scan, identify exactly, where you see your LP tokens going out, and then obviously just click on the contract that those LP tokens interacted with as a part of that transaction. That would allow you to, or that's a cheat sheet way to identify the gauge contract that you've interacted with. However, assuming that we haven't done that, I'll take you through the whole process here. So what we first need to do is we need to go to the gauge proxy contract, and this is the contract that's essentially responsible for deploying the gauge contract each time, say, a gauge needs to be added. So, hypothetically, let's say a snapshot's happened and the community have voted in for a gauge to be added to support a specific liquidity pool that's adding good value to the Phantom ecosystem. So I'll just paste in here I've already pasted it above, but just to sort of go with a natural flow here. This is the Gauge Proxy contract for anyone who wants to follow me through, this walkthrough here. So as we open this up, you'll see here under the internal transactions section, these are all of the contracts that have been deployed by the Gauge Proxy contract each time a new gauge is added. Now, for today's purpose, I know exactly where the Spirit Phantom LP is, but assuming that we don't know that, we would go view all here. And what you'd kind of have to do is pretty much click through each of these transactions in order to identify exactly, which contract you're interacting with. So I know for certain that the Spirit Phantom gauge was the third one that the deployer deployed. So we'll click through here, but just for the sake of, if you're kind of clicking through all of these and trying to figure out which gauge you need to interact with, this is the process that you would go through. So we'll right click on this contract here, and assuming we don't know what it's responsible for. So what we've just opened is a gauge contract. So this is the deployer, this is the Gauge Proxy contract that we're in at the moment, and we're opening up all of the contracts that it has deployed. What we're then going to do in order to determine, okay, which LP is this gauge supporting, we go to the token section of the contract, and as you can see here, there'll usually be a bunch of dust in these. Someone has evidently fat-fingered 65 brush into the black hole here. If you send assets to this contract, there's no way for you to get them back, so don't go sending assets to these contracts. You will see Spirit tokens sitting in here, so just a little bit of a background here. These are the tokens that will be emitted supporting this gauge each week. So, once the weekly epoch reset happens, the MasterChef contract will then send whatever Spirit is delegated towards emissions for that week, depending on what votes it received, to this contract, and that's why we're seeing Spirit tokens sitting in here. You may also see other random LPs in here. Strangely enough, someone's actually sent brush LPs to this contract. We also see another small amount of Spirit LPs sitting in here as well, only 356 of them. So if you're trying to sort of really look for which LP contract that you're wanting to use to identify which liquidity pool tokens this gauge contract actually supports, you're going to be wanting to look for the bigger number here. Bigger number will probably, indicate that, that is the LP contract that gauge supports. So here we can see there's 13,700,000 blah, 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 LP tokens sitting in here. So we're safe to assume that this is the LP contract that the gauge is supporting. So in order to then identify, okay, what tokens, what LP contract is this specifically, we'll right click here and we'll open this up into another tab. And so what we've just done is opened the LP contract now. So we're looking at three separate sets of contracts up here. We've got the Gauge Proxy contract, which is used for deploying the gauge contract specifically. We've got a specific gauge contract that we're querying at the moment. And through that, we've now opened an LP contract that's supporting that, or that gauge contract is supporting. So sitting in the LP contract here, what we then just do is click on the token section, and what we can see here is the two main tokens sitting within this contract. Again, these LP contracts can tend to have a bunch of dust in them. But right here, we're seeing that there's 82 million Spirit tokens in here and 4.1 million Phantom tokens in here. So it's safe to assume that, okay, this is, the LP contract for Spirit Phantom LP. So therefore, we can deduce that this gauge contract here is the gauge that supports the Spirit Phantom LP. Right, so assuming that we have the correct gauge contract now, and assuming that we have a liquidity pool asset or token to deposit into this contract, just picking up from the week prior, so assuming that, we've just gone ahead and interacted with the router contract directly, we've made an LP for Spirit Phantom. What we next have to do is go to the LP contract for Spirit Phantom in this example, and we have to actually approve spend. So we've already got the LP contract open. We're going to go to the contract section here, and we're going to go to write contract. So here what we're actually doing is we're going to go to function 1, which is approve. Now, the spender address is not going to be your address. We're not needing to approve your address here. What we're actually needing to approve is the gauge contract address. And the reason for this being is it's going to be the gauge contract that's going to be interacting with your LP tokens. So by sitting in the LP contract here, we're essentially saying allow the gauge contract to spend these tokens from this wallet. So we're going to connect our wallet here. Which is connected, and we've got our test wallet open, so that's great. So the spender address is going to be this address here, which is the gauge contract. So we'll copy that address over, and we'll paste that in here. I'll just paste these in the Fireside Chat just for anyone who's wanting to follow this step by step. So that's the contract address that you wanted to paste in. Now in the amount section, just for the sake, just for ease and for the sake of this presentation, we'll go with -1, which again, if you weren't around last week, -1 basically allows for unlimited spend. Just make sure that you follow best practice and revoke this approval after the interaction. So that way, you don't have any smart contracts out there that are allowing for unlimited spend of your assets. If you wanted to, you could actually just go to the read contract section here and then just using your address, query the exact amount of LP tokens you have. And then you could put the big number value in there, remembering that it's a U integer parameter. You put the big number in there and then just approve for that exact amount of LP tokens that you wish to spend. So for the sake of this presentation, we'll go ahead and we'll write this transaction off. And we'll approve. Oh, goody, it worked this time. No awkward silences. Great. So we can now go ahead and view this transaction on the blockchain, and we can see that we've now approved for the gauge contract to spend the Spirit Phantom LP tokens. Fantastic. So depositing into the gauge contract. Next, we need to go to the gauge contract, which we're sitting in here, and we'll go to the contract section. Then we'll go to write contract. We'll connect our MetaMask to Phantom Scan. And there's two options here. We can either go with option 1 or option 2. Option 1 is a deposit for a specified amount. So, let's just say you've queried the amount of assets that you have. So let's just do this real quick just for the sake of an example. We'll copy this address and we will query the balance of. So you can see that this, right now we're querying our balance, and we can see that obviously this being a big number, and we're going to be working with big numbers anyway, so that's fine. But this basically says that I have 22.26 Spirit Phantom LP tokens sitting in my wallet. Hypothetically speaking, let's say maybe, if you're wanting to use function 1, which is deposit for a set amount, let's say you wanted to deposit half of your LP tokens in the Spirit Farm, and then maybe you wanted to deposit the remainder of those LP tokens in something like Liquid Driver or a yield optimizer. That would be the premise for you using function number 1. For the sake of this presentation, we're going to go with the easy approach, which is the deposit all function. And this is nice and simple because we've already connected our wallet, and there's not many parameters that are required now that we've actually approved for the LP contract for the gauge contract to interact with the LP tokens via the LP contract. We can simply click here and deposit all and write. Sign off the transaction. That's going through now. And we can see that that has now gone through. We'll double check Phantom Scan just to confirm this, but as you can see here, my wallet interacting with the gauge contract, 22.26 Spirit Phantom LPs have now been deposited into the gauge contract. And we can further verify this by going to the farms page here, and you can see that those are sitting there now. Nice and simple. So next, how to withdraw LPs from the gauge contract. So having already approved the gauge contract to interact with the LP tokens, we can skip this step. To remove the LP tokens from the gauge contract, we simply need to do the following. We go back to the gauge contract here. We're going to scroll down to function number 8 or 9. Function number 8 is similar to function number 1 from the deposit side if we're withdrawing. If you're wanting to withdraw a specific amount of tokens, you would use this where you'd specify the amount of tokens. All you'd need to do is, again, query your total balance, take that total balance, go and convert that number to a small number just so you can kind of figure out exactly how many tokens you're working with there. And then pick your number. Let's say if I had 22.26 Spirit Phantom LP tokens, but I only wanted to take 10 out. You'd then obviously type 10 into the ETH converter, turn that into a big number, and then paste that big number in here. However, for the sake of this presentation, we're going to be assuming that the only reason why someone is taking this approach is because, the UI is down or there's some kind of emergency that's kind of causing you to freak out. You're probably not going to be going for a limited amount of withdraw here, so you're probably going to be wanting to withdraw all. So we're going to use function number 9 here, which is withdraw all. And this kind of acts as, I guess, an emergency withdraw function. So we're going to write the contract. That's going to pop up in our MetaMask or Rabby. You can see the total value here, which is $2.85 worth of LP tokens. We'll sign this off. We can click this button here to view your transaction on Phantom Scan. Network's lagging a little bit today. Well, hey, at least the awkward silence isn't my fault this time, it's gas. Wow, that's crazy. There we go. So we can see that the gauge contract has now deposited the LP tokens, 22.26 of them, into the test wallet here. And we can further verify this by now going back to the SpiritSwap page, and you'll see that those tokens are no longer sitting in the farm. So there you have it, folks. Nice and easy presentation today. Easy way to finish this, educational fireside series. We were going to take a look at the emergency withdrawal function, but considering we work with a gauge model, the emergency withdrawal function doesn't really apply. So this is, in a weird turn, your way of utilizing the emergency withdrawal function for SpiritSwap. I guess if there's any subject matter that you guys want us to cover over the following weeks, please do let me know. I'm struggling for content here. So, these sessions are for all of you guys. So if there's anything you would like to cover in more detail, please let me know. I'm really eager to sort of, make sure that we're consistently delivering content that you guys are appreciative of. Moving on now, we'll head to questions and answers stage of the fireside chat. This allows for all of you guys to take the stage and ask questions. This is the space for you guys to propose any ideas for the DAO to consider. If you guys are wanting to discuss any subject matter, anything at all, this is your opportunity. A little bit of housekeeping from me just before we move on to that. Next week's Fireside will be hosted by Nazaru and JJB Good specifically. I'll actually be on a flight at this exact time next week, so I won't be able to make the Fireside Chat next week. However, JJ is very experienced with running these. If you guys don't know him, he's one of the head mods over at Liquid Driver, and he runs the deck talks over there from time to time as well. And I believe we'll also have Heesh from the SpiritSwap team joining them to have a discussion around, various ecosystem updates. Who knows? He's been leaking alpha like a sieve lately, so he may have some more beans to spill for you guys. So make sure to catch us up and make that fireside chat. But great, with all that out of the way, Ege, let's move on to Q&A, man.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Thanks for the presentation as always, brother.
Welcome. No problems.
Boys, do we have any questions for this degen?
I guess while we're waiting for the questions to flow through, I could give everyone a little bit of an update on development progress this week. So last week we had the mods testing the bridge, which was fantastic. We did like the bridge upgrades are pretty insane. It's not really anything that other protocols are offering right now. However, it does require a lot of moving components. We're basically having to partner with multiple third parties on this venture. I'll just be careful what I'm saying. However, when you do have multiple third parties, multiple stakeholders, it sort of means that there's a lot of moving parts, So we did have the mods did pick up on some things in testing, so we're basically going back to polishing with the developers here. I've condensed and compiled all of the mod feedback and sent that on to the developers, so they're working on that at the moment, or the developer that's specifically responsible for looking after that function, that aspect of a V2. This week, I mean, Ege, you're already aware, we've had the mods going through and testing out the homepage and the portfolio page. So I've collated that feedback and sent that on to our QA this morning, who'll be processing that and shipping that off to the respective developers to work on any feedback. And within the next couple of days, we're going to be having the mods moving on and working on the liquidity, the new liquidity section, add liquidity, because there'll be various liquidity components in V2, as well as the swap page and farms. So little update for you there. If anyone has any questions, if anyone has anything that they want to propose to the DAO, if anything, if there's anything that you guys want to discuss, now's the time. So put your hand up.
Let me barge in real quick. Hello, guys. JJ here. If you don't know me by name, Nick, I have a question. To be honest, because I'm really these lessons are really valued. Has a very great value for us because I am such a noob in these things and learning myself. So thank you very much for that. So my question would be just all the functions that you have been telling us during these lessons. Would it be applicable to, for example, all the farms, or would it differ from a smart contract to smart contract?
No, all of the farms will have the same structure within the smart contract. So the only variable is the LP that it supports. So yes, great question. No, they're all the same as the answer.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So it is not only SpiritSwap. By learning these, we are not actually learning not only the contracts from SpiritSwap, but most of the other farm contracts that we can find out there. So
correct, yeah. So for the Uni V2 model, which works on the X times Y equals K model, this will apply. Something like Balancer, these will be slightly different. But again, you can apply the same methodology. So it's just about using logic, you know what I mean? Like in here, you can see the parameters are all very descriptive. Deposit means deposit set amount. Deposit all means you're just going to deposit everything that you have in your in your wallet. Some of the functions, again, will vary, like I said, with Balancer. So for example, if you're working with Beethoven smart contracts, for example, it may vary, obviously, because you've got weighted pools and stable pools in there which work on different math. But the process is the same. So it may take a little bit of figuring out and playing around with it if you're working with another model, like I said, like Balancer. But yeah, for Solidly and Uni V2 sort of style forks, it's all a very similar approach. So again, it's just about applying logic. So yeah, these contracts will be slightly different from Balancer, but then again, in terms of Pancake or Uni V2 or Sushi, it's all very much the same. Yeah.
Perfect. By the way, guys, I don't really want to pump the hype too much, but after seeing the V2, you're gonna love it. That's all I can say. That's all I'm allowed to say. Let's say you're gonna love it.
Someone put a muzzle on him. No, thank you, JJ. Appreciate your input as always. JJ's also just reminded me. I'm just going to find this document here, and I'll post this in announcements afterwards as well. But just for you guys, educational fireside content, interacting with smart contracts. I've actually put together a community copy of this. So all of you guys can follow this if you would like. I'll just upload this file now. Community copy. There you go. So for anyone who wants to sort of in their own time, it might have been a little bit quick with me taking you through all of that, but in your own time, go ahead and try and recreate these steps. There's a little PDF list of step-by-step flow through as to how to interact with the Gauge contract directly to deposit and withdraw LP tokens. Any other questions, anyone? Nope.
Not, I guess.
How about that market, eh?
Oh.
I think it's interesting, macros seem to be a big thing at the moment. I feel like what's different about this downturn to the last downturn, I've been through a few of them, is, macros very much to apply right now. We haven't really seen stagflation take effect throughout the crypto market, its existence. Looming recession possibly as well. I am a little bit of a skeptical person, I guess you could say, and I'm going to go as far as saying I'm getting very sort of 1920s sort of vibes here, so possible even depression. It's going to be really interesting to see how things shape out. All I would say is, make sure to keep an eye on anything that the Fed are coming out with. Right now, they went with a fairly aggressive base point rise earlier this week. Jerome Powell came out announcing, 75 BP increase. Essentially, what they're trying to do is tighten up the money supply. Obviously, by restricting supply, you're trying to deal with the inflation that's been rampant over the last 13 years, remembering that quantitative easing has pretty much been happening over the last 13 years. And over the last year, that is the period that the most amount of money has ever been printed in circulation. So right now they're trying to basically put the fire hose on. And this is a balancing act, because if you restrict monetary supply by too much, you actually strangle the market and pretty much collapse the economy. So it's like a fine balancing act between trying to sort of control inflation as it is, but not kill the market at the same time. And like I said, these sort of course events haven't really been present, throughout the existence of the crypto space. I think what's sort of adding fuel to the fire on top of macros being involved, because you do have so many institutions now involved in crypto investments, and that has a knock-on effect, especially into DeFi, considering stablecoin situation right now. But because we do have a whole bunch of institutional players and swimming in the ocean with us now, we're starting to see more of a direct correlation between the equities markets and commodities markets, because all of these guys, they're all carrying the same stuff on their balance sheets. So I'd say definitely keep an eye on macros. Also the fact that last sort of reset that we had back in the 2017, 2018 sort of era, DeFi didn't really exist then. You had the odd DEX here and there. What was Ether Delta was one of the first ones that I interacted with on Ethereum. That was before, liquidity mining or anything like that. And certainly before any of the, hugely lucrative but hugely degenerate products that we're sort of seeing emerge as a result of DeFi. And I kind of feel like it's leverage that has really, really helped stimulate this recent bull market. Obviously, leverage just allows you to make money on steroids, which, obviously inflates the ecosystem. But, again, inflation needs to be controlled. And this is kind of, I guess the side effect, of the hangover, I guess you could say, of the party that we've all been having. You've got all of these algo stable coins that are backed by treasuries that are full of shit. Again, it just reminds me of the whole CDO sort of tranches back in 2009, but the DeFi equivalent. As those start to lose value, the Jenga tower, I suppose, starts to collapse. I'm starting to get PTSD of that scene in The Big Short where they're basically explaining how the CDOs are just full of really, really bad bond contracts that are basically worth nothing. I guess it's like, you've got Three Arrows at the moment who have announced that they're pretty much insolvent. BlockFi, I think, just got announced yesterday as well. I think the degeneracy of a lot of these players is starting to really come out of the wash now, and they're kind of scrambling to keep themselves from getting liquidated. And if those liquidations do go ahead, that essentially means a lot of those underlying collateral assets being sold on the open market in an already market downturn. I never like to really give financial advice, but I did read something really interesting from an inside group that I'm involved in, and everybody likes the DCA theory. I'm a big fan of it. Dollar cost average on the way down. What this individual proposed was, considering dollar cost averaging on the way up. So essentially, don't try to catch a falling knife, in short. So rather than sort of buying in bits and pieces as the market goes down, what he suggested is, wait for a retrace, wait for a confirmed correction in the market and dollar cost average on the way up. That way you're not trying to catch a falling knife. And he feels that that's an alternative way to look at it, which I feel is quite interesting. I haven't personally done that before, but, I think it might be interesting what I might be doing to test that theory out is putting two separate wallets aside, one for a dollar cost average down and one for a dollar cost average up, and both feed them or seed them with the same amount of money and seeing what strategy pays best dividend in the long run. So right, well, I can see that not many people have many questions to ask, so I'll wrap this up. I might give it one more minute just to give people a chance to write anything down. And again, if anyone wants to jump up on stage and have a chat with us, that would be fantastic. You guys are all welcome. But if not, then we'll sort of wrap things up. So, Ege, thank you very much for taking the time to set this up today. JJ, be good. Awesome, man. Thanks for your participation. And I'm sure the community will be, enthused to have you take the reins next week while I'm jet setting in the air. And after next week, everything will resume as normal. But again, guys, if there's any subject matter that you want me to cover, please make sure to make this apparent to the mods. Otherwise, we'll just sort of be having a general, if there's no specific educational content that you guys want covered, we'll just have a general chat. Unless you guys ask for it, I really don't know what you want me to cover. So if there's anything that's sort of piquing your interest, anything that you're curious about, please make sure to let us know, and I can cover that for you in further educational content moving forward.
And also I want to say that next week, as Nick mentioned, we will have Hish on our side, who is our DeFi brain. So if you guys have any questions to Hish for the next week, you can take notes of those questions as asked on the Fireside Chat.
Absolutely.
When
Fantastic.
Super
close. When you guys finish your testing. It's really not far. We're not intentionally stalling or anything. It's just we want to make sure we get this right. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of moving components to V2. As you guys saw with just as a really, really basic example of the previous Fireside Educational series that we've done, just some of the prerequisite work that's required, the computational stuff that's required when doing something as basic as, adding to a liquidity pool, all the math that you had to do in the background. We have to code all of that up, in Web3 format. So this is, we have to allow for so many variables. There's a lot of logic involved in all of it. And so that's why it takes time. It's as simple as that, And if you get one thing wrong, then as you guys, saw last week, it all breaks, nothing works. So it's at this stage, most of it's done. It's just about dotting I's and crossing T's. We're basically doing our best to break stuff at the moment, so that way it doesn't break for you guys when we actually launch it. But not long. Like I said, you guys will very much be aware when V2 is coming. I've got a lot of marketing collateral lined up. There'll be promotional videos, there'll be teasers, there'll be banners. So once you start seeing that popping up on Twitter and within our Discord, you'll know that V2 is very, very close, probably about, a week away once you start seeing that content starting to come out there. So a little bit of alpha.
By the way, we got a question coming from Not Enough Mana. I just open your mute. You can talk and ask. Not Enough Mana. Hey, man.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking my question. This is actually my first fireside chat that I've tuned in. I've been using Spirit really since I'd say summer of last year. But anyway, just kind of, Nick, you were mentioning topics for fireside chat, and I definitely don't want to have specific questions that maybe are like common knowledge. But I did like how you were speaking to kind of like how you see, the correlation between what's going on now and maybe previous bear markets, and kind of just taking like a macro perspective into what's happening now. So sorry I don't have a specific question, but I just wanted to say I do like how you talked about some of that stuff. So I will be tuning into, I know you said you're not going to be here for the next one, but I'll try to tune into future fireside chats. And if you wouldn't mind talking more about that macro perspective and kind of how you see it, all that stuff you talked about was super valuable for me. So just wanted to mention that.
Awesome, man. Look, I really appreciate that feedback. And again, look, a lot of people are shy to get up and jump on the stage and chat. So first off, I just want to say, Not Enough Mana, thank you very much for jumping up and conversing with me. I really appreciate that feedback. That's good to know. It's nice to have validation from the community that, what I'm doing is appreciated, that I am pushing the right buttons, so to speak. Funny that you should mention that. So I've always been interested in macroeconomics. I haven't really had much time to study it as much as I would like. Recently, I came across a guy within the King's chat. His name is Adam Classic. I won't go disclosing too much info about him because he is a really private guy, but he is one of the smartest people that I've ever interacted with. Him and I have been having some very, very interesting discussions over the last week, in DMs about the whole macroeconomic outlook. He's given me some really interesting literature to read. I don't know if again, depending on how interested you are in the stuff, Not Enough Mana, but if you haven't read the book, I've just started reading it, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I would very much recommend that you read that book. It's very interesting. It's about the creation of the Fed. And it poses some really interesting questions. Unfortunately, the guy who wrote it was kind of, labeled as a heretic by, Wall Street and majority of supporters of the Fed and centralized banks and all of that. But it is a very interesting read. So I'd highly recommend you read that book if you haven't read it already. Further to your request for more discussion around this content, Crypto Clay, I don't know if anyone knows of him. You guys probably should, especially if you watch Unchained. He's a good friend of mine. I had a chat with him a couple of weeks back, asking to see if he would be interested in jumping on here and having more of a discussion around macros, because he really covers that area. Pretty sure he used to work for Yahoo in their content production team, specifically surrounding the economic sector. So he's got vast amount of experience there. So I'll make sure to get him on for future fireside chats, because he said he'd be more than happy to jump on and have a chat about this, and maybe have him just, intro things with a brief rundown of, the week that's been and any macroeconomic updates. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll make sure to tee that up. But yeah, sorry, Not Enough Mana. I'm kind of waffling here, but I really appreciate your feedback, dude. Cheers, man.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Most welcome. Thanks for the feedback. Well, guys, yeah.
We can wrap this up, right?
Yeah, I guess if there's no more questions, we can wrap this up now. But thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, I'll miss you guys next week. I'll try and tune in if I manage to get Wi-Fi on my phone. I won't participate, obviously, because it'll actually be an early morning flight. Most of the people on the plane will be asleep, but I'll make sure to sort of slip on in there and have a listen, and if I can get some Wi-Fi on the plane. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'll miss you all next week, but I'll look forward to catching up with you guys the week after. Have a great weekend ahead, and